go ahead and get to our next topic. And that is because there's been some interesting Switch 2 developments. And folks, I'll continue for those watching the video version to work on my camera once I introduce the topic and other people can talk. Um, so there's been a lot of interesting stuff going on with Switch 2. We haven't had a ton of like rumors and leaks happening. So this isn't like that usual, oh, here's some rumors and leaks. This is actually just something interesting, a new products coming out that made us think of something today. So Thunderstash Gaming's been working with like BenQ behind the scenes a little bit on a product, an upcoming release they have coming up of the what is it called? The Beat Creatus GR10 Steam Deck Dock USB 4 mobile docking station. It is a mouthful, but that is the complete title on the website.
That's SEO.
Yeah, it's SEO. They're trying to target Steam Deck, but then also, hey, it's not just Steam Deck. And normally we wouldn't really talk about this because they're clearly just, there's a lot of docking stations for PCs and Steam Decks and all that. But as he's working with them on potentially covering up that product for them, even though it's targeted for Steam Deck, it works with other stuff. But when Stash was communicating with them, he was wondering about Switch 2 because, look, a lot of people in his audience are probably going to ask, hey, will this thing possibly work with Switch 2? Because it's a really neat little dock. And if you could use it with even Switch 2, that's pretty cool. And he was told, yeah, it will, because it uses HDMI 2.1, which I find interesting because we technically didn't have that confirmed yet for Switch 2 that it uses HDMI 2.1. Kind of curious how BenQ knows that. I don't know if they have a unit that they were able to test it with. Obviously, we're not going to pry that kind of prying because that'd be under NDA anyways. That being said, okay, that's cool. Like we learned Switch 2 supports HDMI 2.1, which was pretty much expected anyways. It's pretty standard these days. Now, so the dock can work with Switch 2. So who really cares beyond having a convenient travel dock? Why are we even bringing this up? What's it matter? Okay. Well, this device, this dock supports 1080p at 360 hertz, 4K at 120 hertz, and 8K at 60 hertz. Now, this is obviously just HDMI 2.1 pass-through. This is what the HDMI 2.1 standard supports. And yeah, okay, cool. Like with it supporting a bunch of different devices, including PCs, it would make sense that it has all that support. Even though there's like not a lot of devices that really truly support 8K. However, the thought process here is that higher refresh rates is interesting because there's actually an old rumor. Let's bring this up on the screen. This one I found to be really, really interesting. So let me share the thing here. This should work. If this doesn't work, then I got a bigger problem going on. Let's see. That should be working, right? Yeah, we're good. All right. So, there's this old rumor. It was posted over here on Twisted Voxel. However, it's not from them. It's actually from Taiwan. I'm just avoiding translations. But Taiwan's Economic Daily reported a new rumor regarding hardware specs for Switch 2, including details on the handheld's display. The source mentioned that the console maker is expected to launch. This is a bit old, back in 2024, before that delay happened. However, due to constraints such as global inflation, the new product will retail for $100 more, $400, right? The price rumors have been going on forever. That's not what we care about. It's the details. A few details regarding the hardware specs featured in the Switch 2 were shared by the source. T239, 8 gigabytes of memory. We now know that to be 12, so that's a little outdated there. 64 gigabytes internal storage. We now know that's 256. Again, this is a bit of an older rumor, all right? But the display at 120 hertz. Interesting. Most people dismissed the idea of 120 hertz. Would they really do 120 hertz? All right. So high refresh rate gaming is actually something a lot of gamers do prefer over resolution. For all we talk about the 4K and the DLSS upscaling and trying to get like 60 FPS at 1440p and 4K. 120 hertz is so relevant and 1080p is so relevant is that the 5000 series GPUs are still given high refresh rate 1080p testing in reviews because it is so highly desirable target for competitive gaming. Now, this may be something we consider more, given that Phil Spencer also recently said that in their future events, they will have Nintendo and PlayStation logos, obviously including Nintendo Switch, Switch 2, all that stuff in future events. We already saw PlayStation 5 logos in their last event. Switch 2 logos obviously can't probably be till after April 2nd. So when you consider that, Microsoft has a number of games that would benefit from 120 hertz for the competitive scene. Halo, even single player experiences like Doom: The Dark Ages, really big benefit there. Call of Duty, which we already know is coming because they have a contract for it. So 120 hertz would be at 1080p, even in docked mode, would be a really, really big get for Switch 2. And 120 hertz is obviously already supported by Xbox and PlayStation, the current systems. So that's just interesting to think about. So do we think it's realistic that Nintendo would allow 120 hertz specifically at 1080p? Because I don't think they really have the processing power to really try to offer that any other higher resolution than that. Is that rumor from Taiwan about the screen itself supporting 120 hertz seems likely. And one reason why it's interesting is Taiwan. Nintendo just announced this week they set up a new subsidiary, Nintendo of Taiwan, in Taiwan, because they're doing so much business there. They need an entity to manage it. What kind of business are they doing there? Sure, there's some system sales. They have Switch there. But the Switch sales in Taiwan aren't huge. The manufacturing for Nintendo is becoming massive in Taiwan, and they need something there to manage it all. So, quite interesting. It also would make sense then why a Taiwanese news place might have this information on a 120 hertz screen, because maybe the screens are being made there, because Samsung, who is rumored to be the screen manufacturer, they manufacture the screens in Taiwan. So, this all comes full circle. Do we think 120 hertz is supported on Switch 2 in any meaningful way? And if so, are you excited about it? Let's start with the man who got the emails, Thunderstash.
Yeah, so I think it will be 120 hertz. And again, yeah, I go back to that original rumor. And I want to think that, I forget the leaker's name, but the handheld gaming leaker, the one that was going to show the pictures on Christmas of Switch 2. You guys remember that guy? I think he said it was going to be 120 hertz as well. But yeah, I expect this. I really do. And again, yeah, as Nate mentioned, I got an email from him stating that it's going to be HDMI 2.1. Literally, that it says the Switch 2 has HDMI 2.1 output. And so I think that's a huge deal. So I don't know how many of you have played games like at 4K 120. You have to have like a fairly new TV or monitor. But for instance, on the PS5, I'm able to play certain games, specifically like first person shooters and racing games are the most popular. Okay. And some of them have the option to play at 4K 120. It's not many though. But then a lot of the other ones have the option to go 1080p, 120 frames per second with VRR, variable refresh rate. I gotta say, yeah, Next Handheld was the name. Thank you, Mr. Pnug. I gotta say that like playing on a display at 120 hertz looks amazing. At even in 1080p on an 85-inch. I have an 85-inch Sony TV, and then I played on my 150-inch projector, same thing. I played at 1080, 120. For example, when I reviewed Call of Duty Black Ops in November, I played it on my Series S at 1080p, 120 hertz. And we all know that the Switch 2 is being compared, of course, to a PlayStation 4 Pro and a Xbox Series S as far as its specs. And that is without DLSS. And again, we all know how powerful and how magical DLSS is. So I factor all of that in, right? In saying confidently that, yeah, I would expect it. If Switch 2 is going to be between a PS4 Pro and a Series S without DLSS, then yes, I expect HDMI 2.1. I expect the option to do 4K 30. 4K 60 would be great. If that can happen, amen. But I would expect 4K 30 and 1080p 60 to 120 on certain games. And again, it makes a huge difference. And if you haven't experienced it firsthand, you might not know, because it's not something that you can just view on a YouTube video. You have to see it firsthand. It's not something that translates over in a YouTube video. So, Gamebird, I'll go with you next. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think it tracks. I like you said. I mean, you put it pretty well that if it's based on kind of the leaks and rumors, if the power's kind of gonna land between the PS4 and the Series S, I don't see why it wouldn't run at the 120 hertz. I do think we're gonna see more of the 1080p 60 frames than the 4K 60 frames. For a number of reasons, obviously. And I mean, even the PS5 Pro is not really able to guarantee 60 frames per second 4K. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not the big tech person, but from what I do know of PS4 Pro, Xbox Series S, I think 120 hertz I think it just makes sense. It seems like it's going to be good to go with Switch 2 based on the leaks.
Let me ask you guys this real quick, and then I'm going to hand it over to Josh. You remember the Gamescom original rumor of Breath of the Wild running at 4K 60? I go back to that too, and I'm like, okay, hold up, And again, all of this kind of like goes into this email I got about HDMI 2.1 and the specs of 2.1. But it's like, if I recall, the rumor, and this is what I would expect, is that in docked mode 4K 60, and in handheld mode, obviously 1080. So if Breath of the Wild can run at 4K 60, maybe you'd think a lot of other games could. I guess is what I'm getting at. You'd think a lot of other games could. So it'll be interesting. I think something like Mario Kart, the new Mario Kart, I can see that running at 120 hertz. Yeah. 1080, 120, handheld mode. Why not? It's a racing game. We see it in racing and first-person shooters. So, Josh, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Mario Kart is the first thing I'm thinking about. But the second thing is, like, if Forza Horizon 5 is truly coming, and the Halo games, right? Like, I not that we need it necessarily, right? We've been Switch gamers for the last 8 years, but I will say when I fired up, Fortnite on my Series X and played it versus playing it on my Switch, it's night and day. Like, it is night and day, and we know we're not getting the bleeding edge technology of the the PS5 Pro and that kind of stuff. Totally fine with that. But if they can, start to squeeze at least some of the juice that we would see like in a Series S and a Series X, like into this tablet, it would be amazing. And I mean, for a while there, the best place to play Fortnite was on an iPad. This was years ago, but it was like that was the only place to get like 60 frames a second or whatever. Like, back, I mean, this is a while ago, right? But like, so to have them double the frame rate from what it is now, like, it's one of those things that, like, for me, I didn't realize I was missing it until I tried it, and then was like, oh, it's I'm not at the point that, like, oh, I can't play games that aren't running at 60 or 120. Like, it's not the end of the world to me, especially if you're doing something like Pokemon or Xenoblade or something like that, But but Metroid Prime 4 running at 120, sign me up. Like, I would I would be
Right.
all about it, like all about it. So
Yeah, I love that. I mean, Breath of the Wild obviously is a great example because of the leaks saying that, Nintendo showed it running at that 4K 60. A lot of other third-party stuff that was on the Switch that if they can get to perform on Switch 2 at 4K 60, like Bayonetta, we got all three of those games. I know there was in the reviews for Bayonetta 3, there were some issues with, it not running at 60 frames per second, and it could have used a little bit more oomph behind it to get it, that sleek, fast-paced action game. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good thing. But real quick, speaking of leaks, I actually have to use the restroom, so I'll be right back. Gonna go drain the turkey.
You're gonna have a panty party of your own.
We'll have to wait and see.
All right, John, hand it over to you. What are your thoughts here?
I mean, I haven't played many games at one. I think the only game that I played at 120 was Forza Horizon 5 on Xbox Series X, and yeah, it is nice. It is definitely nice. It's super smooth. I don't remember if it was 4K or not, but it looked really pretty. The one thing that I'm worried about is the games being able to actually run at these frame rates. Like, we know that some games have struggled to even hit 30. Not just Nintendo games, but like Dragon's Dogma, I think is 30. Elden Ring, I think is 30. At least on the Steam Deck, I believe it's 30. So, I mean, it would be nice to have the option to have these 120 FPS, but are the games actually going to be able to run it? That's the real question.
I agree with you on that. I think that is the real question because only so many games can run at 120 on PS5. Like, or maybe I should reword that only so many games have that option. I'm sure other games could run at 120 if they wanted to include that option, but there's just not a lot of games out there to be able to do that. So yeah, you definitely raised something interesting there. I know Elden Ring's on PS4, of course, which I think sometimes we forget. So it ran at 30 frames per second on PS4. And I'm trying to see
I think it was 30 everywhere.
For PS4 Pro. I played it on PS5 and it runs at 60.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe Series S would be a good one to look at too.
I think the most important thing is kind of like what John was saying, like if they're going to advertise 120, then the game needs to be able to do that. That's where, like, you don't want the bad press of, like, this game's stuttering, like, even at 30 frames. Like, I think, like, I understand DLSS is magic and all that kind of stuff, but, like, I think the most important thing is, like, I would much rather have a 1080p 60 that's consistent than a 4K 120 that's not, or a 1080 120 that's not, like that, because
Totally.
that's what goes crazy on Twitter and everything else where the games are getting thrown under the bus when it's like. And again, I think it's the worst when you're talking about like a Series X or a PS5 and it's like these games are struggling to hit 30 at times and you're just like, what is going on? The box for the PlayStation said 8K on the side. Remember?
I know.
Like it was like, why are you biting off more than you can chew here?
Well, I think like Thunderstash's point about you also need a monitor or TV that could run at 120. Same with the 8K thing. I don't know anybody that has an 8K TV right now.
Me either.
So, the people that are buying a Nintendo Switch 2 probably don't necessarily have the equipment to even run 120. So, and we know not docked, it's not going to be 120. So
Yeah.
I don't know how useful it's going to be.
I feel like it's a nice feature for Switch One games to be able to run at 120. Maybe people who are a little bit more into the tech side and the power side decide to pick up the Switch 2 because it's more premium and Nintendo finally has a 4K device, and maybe they're like, oh cool, I could play some of these old games that I missed at 120 when I wasn't interested. I don't know. Just a thought.
Well, and I've been somewhat spoiled. I've been using an M Classic almost since the beginning of the Switch's life cycle, and so I've always had a at least a 2K monitor. So I found it really strange because at one point I had two Switches hooked up side by side, and the difference from one running at 1080 to one running at 2K was
big.
It was significant. And so I mean, worst case scenario, I plug this the M Classic into the into the Switch 2 if I have to, but hopefully we don't have to, and we get to see this thing as a next gen console.
I think the sweet spot is what we've talked about. Like, I look at all the games I played on PS5. Every time I choose performance mode. Every time. That's the sweet spot. So I think if we can get the sweet spot on Switch 2, everybody's going to be happy.
Yep.
Dude, 120 hertz would just be awesome, man. It's only got to be supported at 1080p. They don't got to do it any other res. I think there'll be games that'll take advantage of it if they do.
Mario Kart at 120 would be huge. Huge.
Yeah, be really cool.
So here's the question. Let's say it has this. Nintendo's notorious to not talk about anything tech-wise ever. Do you think they would even announce it?
Digital Foundry will tell us.
I'm like, I kind of feel like Nintendo might not even tell us it's a thing. Just like I don't think they'll tell us about upscaling DLSS stuff. It's just going to be there.
Yeah, it'll be too confusing for the consumer, and
I think you're gonna be surprised. April 2nd, they're gonna be everything's gonna be DLSS or whatever, 120 hertz.
Yeah, they're gonna show us the box,
12K
on the box. It's gonna say 8K like the PS5 did.
Tall Show just mentioned a new F-Zero at 120.
That would be sick.
That'd be sick.
If they do have this feature that you can upscale to 120, and they have an F-Zero would be a perfect way to promote that feature. It'd be like it's at 120, 1080.
It won't be a new F-Zero. F-Zero 99 at 120.
Come on. I know for the general consumer, like most people don't actually have a 120 hertz TV, and not everyone plays on monitors and stuff like that have higher refresh rates. So I get for like the general consumer, it's really not that big of a deal, because again, 120 hertz TVs haven't necessarily taken off with the mainstream because there's just not a lot that support it's gaming. Like that's it, and people buy TVs for more than that, so they'd rather spend more money on like having an OLED or a better picture quality than worrying about 120 hertz. But
they can't even tell when they have the motion thing turned on their TVs, and everything looks like a soap opera. I'm like, oh my god!
Oh yeah,
shut it off.
That was fun when that happened.
Good. Yeah, when I go over to some of my friends' houses, and I'm like, have you ever changed the picture settings on your TV? No. Okay, I guarantee this TV can look way better than this. Let me the remote.
Yeah, every friend's house that I go to, I do the same thing. I'll see the picture. I'm just like, we can get a way better picture out of this. Let me get your remote. Let me work on this for you. I'll go to you guys go to tvratings.com.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Love the website.
Absolutely.
Been going there for probably a decade actually. And they have a whole settings section that will actually give you these settings to plug into the
put
TV.
in your TV and it helps you with your model.
Yeah, it's great. So anytime I go to a friend's
sitting
house,
here running their TVs on Vivid or Energy Saver.
Yeah, I'm like, let me fix this up for you.
I don't want to say anything because I'm one of those people. I don't mess with my TV settings.
Oh
it is
my
what
God.
it is.
Get that
Factory
ambient light
settings.
bullshit off your TV. Don't ever put the ambient light on there.
The sky is supposed to be purple,
let's
right?
Be careful with the hazing, guys.
Here we go. it begins.
It has
Okay.
begun.
Anyone else have any thoughts on any of this? I mean, I think it's just we'd all probably like to have it. Just as an
Absolutely.
option.
Yeah.
Now, do we think this is the big thing? Do we think it's going to be included? If let's say this supports it in dodge mode, not that hard to do. Ramp the power up, choose 1080p. You can have your 120 hertz. Do we think they're going to actually put it in the screen on the handheld? Because there was an interesting thing brought up that if it's on the screen on the handheld, obviously then everyone could potentially enjoy 120 hertz just in handheld mode. And one thing about screens with 120 hertz is it helps with variable refresh rate as well, which is a
Too
huge
expensive.
deal.
It's too expensive.
Yeah, I don't know how I don't know how
He's like,
pricey.
you ruined my question.
I mean, no, that's an opinion though that Nintendo won't do it because it's too expensive, and I think
we're not even getting an OLED screen right out the gate. So like, I really don't think we'll have 120 hertz handheld. I don't see that at first. Maybe like a Switch 2 Pro or whatever.
Yeah, I'm looking at 120 hertz 8-inch screens. So these are obviously ones that are already made and being sold at retail that people can just buy for themselves. And they would include components that you wouldn't really need because it'd be on the motherboard and stuff. But they're like $50. I don't know what Nintendo would be able to get that for, obviously, if they did go that route. But it is obviously more expensive than 60 hertz. That's like $25.
Yeah.
So there is a point there. Now OLED's even more expensive than that. But it's one of those things like I think just for the screen on the system, if we get VRR at all in any form and even a little bit of HDR, I think that would be fine because we don't have any of that on the current Switch.
Right.
And just a higher quality panel. I know it's probably still going to be edge lit, even though I don't want it to be. Rather have like local dimming zones, and we're just not going to get that.
Totally.
But yeah, like I think that's more likely than 120 hertz. But who knows? I mean, maybe we're all wrong, and maybe Nintendo will advertise 120 hertz, and they will push it, and they're going to say, "Hey, this is everyone talks about how this is the same as the Switch 1. Handheld mode 120 hertz, baby." And then they charge us $500 for the system, and we're like, "Oh,
$499. You got to.
What have I done?
it better be OLED 120 hertz." Damn, you're charging that.
Yeah,
but
I was shaking my head when you were first asking because I'm with John. I don't think they're gonna have handheld have 120 hertz on the screen. I just feel like it seems like one of those areas that they want to cut costs. Obviously, according to the leaks or rumors, they want to cut costs at launch. One of the main reasons why they're doing an LCD instead of an OLED to make the console more affordable out of the gate, and then they could do like the OLED model down the road. They also cut costs with like storage space all the time. Like storage space on Nintendo consoles is super small. It's not that expensive to have a little bit bigger of a storage space, but they make the cuts there. But again, like you said, Nate, who's to say? This is a new Nintendo. This is the first generation that we're going into with a new president outside of the GameCube.
Yeah.
So
they're going to tell us to get 3 jobs to afford this thing.
Maybe Furukawa has a different vision. Maybe he's like, no, we're going Hertz, baby. It's going to say Hertz and giant writing on the box. Maybe they'll do a 10-minute segment on teraflops. Who knows? This is a new territory.
What if the screen is OLED? We technically don't know anything about the screen.
We don't. Yeah.
Like even the shipping data, there's like, okay, they ordered screens, but there's no details outside of 8 inches. That's all it says. We don't know we don't know anything about the screen. And so like we assume it's going to be LCD to cut costs. But you know what? OLED screens didn't exist on Nintendo platforms until Furukawa. Just saying.
Yeah, they made another SKU and charged us $50 extra.
Yeah, he's built different. But yeah, the OLED's more expensive. The screen's more expensive. To be fair, though, guys, it wasn't just an OLED screen. Everyone always focuses on. They doubled the size of the memory, So they gave us 64 instead of 32. And they gave us the all metal kickstand, which is clearly more expensive than that cheap plastic piece of shit they put on the original Switch. I'm not saying it's extremely more expensive, but the hinge system and all that, like that, there is some extra machining and some extra cost there that, look, that little wobbly piece of shit was probably 2 cents to make versus, 15 cents to make the one they're using in the end for OLED. Anyways, I'm just saying that those are the things they use to justify the cost difference, and they put an Ethernet port on the dock for whatever that's worth. But I appreciate it, by the way. Not having to plug a fucking dongle in for Ethernet is really
I
nice.
wonder if that's going to be there. Did they show the dock enough that the LAN port's there?
So we have not seen from Nintendo. We have not seen the back of the dock with the ports. But next handheld that Stash was bringing up, the guy that was leaking stuff, he had a picture, as did who was that? Was it Laura K. Buzz? I believe was the other one with a picture of the back of the dock, and it showed that there was an Ethernet and HDMI. It was the same ports as on the OLED dock. So that's good. That's good news, by the way. Nintendo actually including the Ethernet port day one. Thank God. It should just
Smash players get a LAN port.
Yeah.
Wow, gaming, here we come.
But yeah, 120 hertz. I think in docked mode at 1080p. I don't see any reason it can't support it. And there will be games that will take advantage of it. But you got to give the consumer the choice when they load the game what they want to run it at. And that'll be on the game to give you that choice. Because that's how it is on the other platforms, by the way. The games let you choose between the 120 hertz mode or higher fidelity 60 hertz.